A warm welcome to you all from The Curious Case. I'm Davis, your host for tonight, and I'm so happy you're here. Tell me, where are you tuning in from tonight? I always enjoy hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new story. Now, let's begin tonight's mystery. Evening settled soft over Street Mary Mead. The village fair still buzzed, though the light had turned honey gold. Children chased ribbons between the stalls. The brass band played a tune slightly out of key. It didn't matter. Nothing ever really did here. Miss Marple moved carefully along the prize tables, checking labels for Lady Bantry. Her thin fingers adjusted a crooked rosette on a jar of plum jam. The scent of scones drifted from the refreshment tent. Butter, sugar, and something faintly burnt. She smiled. A fair was never perfect. Perfection bored her. Lady Bantry stood nearby, fanning herself with the program. "Hot as a July market," she said. Marple nodded, eyes still on the ribbons. She had noticed the jam winner's label handwritten, uneven, the ink still wet. Someone had been in a hurry. Small things like that told her everything. The sound of bicycle wheels broke through the band's music. Heads turned. A young woman coasted in, a canvas bag strapped to the carrier, uniform slightly too large. The new postmistress, Mrs. Vale, barely a week in the village and already whispered about alone, pale, polite. Her eyes darted as if measuring distance between faces. She parked near the tent and lifted a single envelope from her satchel. Lilac wax seal. No return mark. Unusual paper, thick, city-made. Marple's knitting fingers itched even without the needles. Mrs. Vale crossed the green. She hesitated once, as though weighing the air. Then she approached the vicar, Reverend Clement, who stood chatting with Colonel Melchett near the raffle table. "Delivery for you, sir," she said, voice steady but too low. He smiled, kindly, taking it without question. Her hand trembled as it left hers, just once, barely seen. But Marple saw. The letter caught the light. Lilac wax, broken edge where a seal had pressed deep and cold. The vicar slipped it into his jacket pocket, thanked her, and turned back to his conversation. Mrs. Vale stepped away, almost too quickly. She didn't stay for tea, didn't collect her raffle ticket, simply mounted the bicycle and pedaled off, wheels whispering on the gravel path. Lady Bantry watched her go. "Strange little creature," she murmured. "Doesn't look the sort to run a post office. Thin as a string bean." Marple smiled faintly. "Yes, and yet she carries everyone's secrets in that bag." The band struck a brighter note. Children laughed. Evening swelled warm around them. But Miss Marple's gaze lingered where Mrs. Vale had stood, the dust still settling behind her. That tremor in her hand, that sealed envelope, and the faint, smell violets, too faint for a village stamp pad, too deliberate for chance. The vicar had already forgotten it, busy announcing the flower-arranging results. Marple dusted her palms, eyes following his jacket pocket. The lilac paper pressed against the cloth like a bruise. The fair went on. Life always did. But something quiet had entered the evening. A note under the music, a weight beneath the laughter. Odd, she thought. That was not a church hand. It happened quickly, too quickly for anyone to understand what they'd seen. The vicar had just finished announcing the raffle winners. His voice was cheerful, clear, carrying across the green. Then it faltered. A single breath, broken in the middle of a sentence. He swayed once, then dropped. Gasps scattered through the crowd like startled birds. The band stopped mid-note. Mrs. Bantry screamed. Colonel Melchett cursed under his breath and pushed forward. "Make space, give him air." Dr. Haydock was, already moving, medical bag swinging at his side. He knelt beside the fallen man, 2 fingers on the throat, 1 on the wrist. The crowd closed in despite every warning. Curiosity was stronger than fear. Marple stayed where she was, still, observing. Her eyes moved, not her feet. Every sound registered the creak of bunting, the hiss of the tea-urn, the small, helpless murmur that escaped Mrs. Clement's lips. "Arthur," she whispered, but her husband didn't stir. The doctor leaned closer. "Fetch water," he said quietly. Someone ran. Someone else sobbed. The postmistress's bicycle was still lying by the gate, empty. The rider gone. Marple took 2 steps forward, slow, deliberate. The vicar's right hand was clenched tight, too tight for a man fainting. His other lay open on the grass, palm up, as if he'd dropped something. She saw a tear of paper beside his thumb, lilac edge. Wax crumbled into the grass like dry petals. Dr. Haydock shook his head. Nothing to be done, he said softly. Heart failure, he added for the crowd's sake. But his eyes didn't match his words. Colonel Melchett straightened, hat off, voice grim. Best clear the area. Show some decency, people. The fair began to thin, voices falling to low murmurs. Children were led away. Music didn't start again. Miss Marple knelt, brushing aside a thread of bunting that had fallen across the grass. The vicar's jacket pocket was empty. She saw the faint outline where the envelope had been. Gone now. Removed cleanly. Someone had taken it while they fussed over him. She looked around, faces pale, hands trembling. No one looking at her, everyone looking at death instead. Lady Bantry touched her arm. "Jane, come away. You shouldn't be so near." Marple nodded but didn't move. Her eyes caught a flicker of something shiny in the trampled grass. A small seal fragment, pressed flat, half violet, half gold, burned at the edge. She picked it up with her handkerchief. The wax was still warm, not from the sun, from touch. She turned slightly, scanning the field. The post office bag was missing from the bicycle. Mrs. Vale had returned for it, or someone had made it look that way. Dr. Haydock stood, rubbing his temple. Poor man. Sudden collapse. Could happen to anyone. Marple's gaze dropped to the grass again. A corner of paper fluttered near his shoe. She bent, quietly, and saw the rest of the envelope ripped open, empty. Inside, there was nothing at all. By morning, the fair was already a memory. The bunting hung limp. The raffle table stood bare, rain-specked, forgotten. But the post office, that was alive. Everyone had gathered there, as they always did when death came to the village. Voices low at first, then louder. Whispers becoming theories. Theories becoming truth, at least for the hour. Mrs. Price Ridley stood at the counter, coat collar up, eyes sharp. She leaned forward and spoke, like someone sharing scripture. "I saw 2 letters," she said. 2, not 1. Mrs. Bantry gasped. "You couldn't have, Dolly. The vicar had only 1 envelope." Ridley sniffed. "I may be many things, but blind isn't one of them. 1 lilac, 1 darker, almost violet. I said so yesterday. From the back, old mister." Broomley puffed his pipe and muttered, "Lilac, violet, who cares?" Man's heart stopped. Happens every week somewhere. He exhaled a cloud of smoke big enough to hide his smirk. The postmistress, Mrs. Vale, sat behind the counter pale and hollow-eyed. She hadn't slept. Her fingers twisted a damp handkerchief until it nearly tore. "I only delivered 1 letter," she said softly. Her voice barely carried over the hum of talk. "1 letter, addressed to Reverend Clement. That's all." But no one really listened. They nodded politely, then went back to their own versions. Lady Bantry entered next, hat tilted, pearls in place, even grief. Didn't keep her from presentation. "Well," she announced, "I was standing close enough to smell the paper. It was violet, heavy scent violet water. I'd know it anywhere." "Perfume on a letter?" Ridley said sharply. "Not proper, that. Not to a vicar." The room murmured approval. Old Mrs. Hartnell crossed herself. Mrs. Vale's hands began to tremble again. Miss Marple stood near the stamps rack, pretending to study envelopes. Her eyes, calm as ever, missed nothing. Not the ash pattern on the floor beneath Mr. Broomley's chair. Not the way Mrs. Vale avoided looking at the bicycle propped outside. Not the faint violet smear along her sleeve cuff like candle wax that hadn't quite come off. Dr. Haydock came in next, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and disinfectant. He greeted no one, bought nothing. Asked, almost too casually, "Was the letter ever found?" Mrs. Vale shook her head. "No, doctor, not a scrap." "Strange," he muttered. "Paper doesn't vanish," Marple agreed silently. "Paper never vanishes. Only people hide it." The talk carried on half-facts, quarter-truths, bits of imagination stitched together. Everyone remembered something. Everyone wanted to be part of the telling. 2 letters, 1 letter, lilac, violet, perfume. None of it the same, yet all of it certain. Outside, the church bell tolled for morning prayers. The sound cut through the noise like a blade. Conversations faltered. Heads turned toward the steeple. Mrs. Vale began to cry. Mrs. Bantry dabbed her eyes, claiming dust. Mr. Broomley said nothing, just relit his pipe. Marple remained still, unblinking, listening to the lies arrange themselves neatly, like envelopes in a row. Everyone remembered differently except Marple. Inspector Slack arrived just after noon. Motorbike tires spitting gravel, hat tilted low, notebook already in hand. He spoke before anyone asked. Heart failure, he said flatly. Doctor confirmed it. Nothing suspicious here. He liked quick cases, the kind that didn't talk back. Dr. Haydock stood beside him, arms folded. Yes, he said. Heart failure. Sudden, but his tone lacked conviction. Marple caught the pause between his words. It wasn't hesitation, it was discomfort. Slack noticed it too. He narrowed his eyes. You've got doubts, Doctor? Haydock shrugged. None that fit neatly on paper. Then added, almost under his breath, though I've never seen a man fall that way from the heart alone. Slack ignored that. He tapped his pencil. Natural causes. Always happens quicker than we expect. Move on. He turned to Marple. You were there, weren't you? Yes, she said. Didn't look unnatural to you, did it? Her voice stayed calm. No, not unnatural. Just organized. He frowned. She smiled politely. He stopped asking questions. They moved the body early afternoon. Mrs. Clement insisted on handling his coat and Bible herself. Marple offered to help fold the garments. The vicar's jacket still smelled faintly of garden soil and pipe smoke, but underneath something else. Perfume. Violet. Faint, but deliberate. She lifted the jacket pocket flap. No letter, just the crease where one had been. She could still feel the faint pressure in the fabric, as if the paper's ghost remained. Strange, she murmured. Dr. Haydock glanced at her. Something? She shook her head. Just thinking about paper. It keeps secrets longer than people do. Slack overheard. Leave the secrets to me, Miss Marple. You've got your knitting, haven't you? She smiled again. Yes, Inspector. I always do. He left soon after, notebook full, mind empty. Haydock lingered. He stood by the desk, brow furrowed, then bent to pick up a small scrap that had fallen near the hearth. A torn corner, thick paper, pale lilac. He handed it to her. No writing, he said. Just a smudge. Ink. Dark blue, but blurred like a fingerprint dragged too late across the line. She held it to the light. It shone faintly, oily, perfumed. Someone handled it in haste, she said. Haydock nodded. And someone else removed it just as quickly. The two stood in silence. Through the window, the fair tents were being taken down, colors dull under the clouded sky. The world returning to its order, pretending nothing had happened. Slack's motorbike sound faded down the road. Mrs. Clement's sobs drifted through the hall. The church bell tolled, once slow, heavy, final. Marple turned the scrap in her fingers again. Ink, perfume, and paper. An unnatural trio for a holy man. Her eyes narrowed slightly. The pattern was wrong, too tidy, too staged. It did not fit, she whispered. The knock came just after twilight, soft, hesitant, not the sort that expected welcome. Miss Marple set down her teacup. One ring of steam rose, then vanished. She opened the door. Mrs. Vale stood there. No coat, no hat. Eyes rimmed red, lips pressed pale. She looked smaller than she had at the fair, almost childlike in the fading light. May I come in? Her voice shook, barely louder than the wind outside. Marple stepped aside. Of course, my dear. Sit down. You look frozen. Mrs. Vale crossed to the chair by the fire but didn't sit. She held her hands tight around her bag, knuckles white. Her gaze flicked around the room, teacup, knitting basket, window latch. A woman deciding if she could trust the silence. I shouldn't be here, she began. I was told not to talk. But I can't. I can't sleep. Marple said nothing. The kettle hummed softly in the background. She let the girl find her own pace. It was the letter, Mrs. Vale said finally. "The one for Reverend Clement." Marple's eyes stayed gentle. "Yes, the lilac envelope." Mrs. Vale nodded, then shook her head. "It wasn't lilac. Not at first. It was violet. Dark violet." She swallowed hard. "I changed it." Marple didn't blink. "Changed it how?" "I resealed it. The wax broke when I placed it in the bag. I used my own seal to cover it. Lilac wax. It looked close enough." She lowered her voice. "But it wasn't my letter to send." Marple leaned slightly forward. "Who gave it to you?" Mrs. Vale hesitated. "A man. London coat. Spoke polite but quick. He came into the post office after hours. Said it was urgent. Said it must reach the vicar before dusk. Hand delivered. No stamp." She took a breath. "He made me promise not to read the name. Said it was a matter of conscience." "Did you?" "No." Her eyes filled suddenly. "I didn't look, but I wanted to. God forgive me. I wanted to." Marple reached for the teapot, poured her guest a cup. No words yet, just warmth. Steam rose between them like a curtain. "The man," Marple said softly. "Would you know him again?" Mrs. Vale nodded slowly. "Yes. He had a scar near the ear. Left side. And he smelled of something, what do you call it? Chemist's spirits. Like polish. Or varnish." Marple's eyes drifted to the window, where the street lamp flickered. London varnish. Violet ink. No return mark. The shape of the puzzle began to form. "Thank you, my dear," she said. "You did your duty." Mrs. Vale shook her head. "No, Miss Marple. I did what I was told. That's not always the same thing." The kettle clicked off. Silence filled the room, heavy and human. She stood to leave. Her hand lingered on the doorknob. "I can't stop thinking about it," she whispered. The way he said it. "Never read the name." Marple's eyes softened. "Yes," she said quietly. "Sometimes it's the names we don't read that matter most." Mrs. Vale left without looking back. The door shut softly behind her. Marple poured the untouched tea into the sink. Steam rose, faded. It troubled her conscience more than fear. By morning, Miss Marple had questions. Too many for breakfast. She ate little, left her tea half cold, and fetched her notebook. Every name, every address, every path the post took through Street, Mary Mead. She mapped it all by memory, her truest weapon. From the vicarage, the post ran to the green, then to the station road, then back toward the cottages by the orchard. Simple, predictable, until yesterday. Yesterday, the cart came from the opposite direction. Mrs. Vale had said so herself. A borrowed cart, a favor, someone helping, she claimed. But Street Mary Mead didn't believe in coincidences, and neither did she. By 10 o'clock, Marple was standing in the post yard behind the shop. The air smelled of hay, oil, and wet rope. The post cart stood under the shed, wheels still flecked with dust from the fair. She bent low, fingertips grazing the wooden floorboard. Tiny bits of grit, a straw, hairpin, and there a small glint near the back wheel. She picked it up carefully, a wax thread. Violet, curled and frayed at one end, as though melted by heat. She folded it into her handkerchief. Always the little things, she thought. Big lies needed small hinges to swing. Footsteps sounded behind her. Inspector Slack, notebook in one hand, impatience in the other. "Ah, Miss Marple," he said. "Examining the transport, are we? You'll be telling me next that the horse knows the culprit." Marple smiled faintly. "Perhaps it does. Animals notice what men overlook." Slack smirked. "Let's keep to human suspects, shall we? I've checked the register. Nobody strange borrowed the cart. But Mrs. Vale said someone did. She's overwrought. Can't tell left from right since the vicar fell. You can't trust nerves." Marple's eyes dropped back to the cart floor. Her voice stayed gentle. "Still, nerves don't create wax shavings, Inspector." Slack frowned. "What shavings?" She closed her handkerchief. "Nothing important." He sighed, scribbled something meaningless in his pad. "Coincidences, Miss Marple. You'd be surprised how many the world holds." She looked up at him, quiet, kind, unbending. "Not in Street Mary Mead, Inspector. We're too small for coincidences." He grunted and left, boots crunching the gravel. She waited until his motorbike faded. then opened the cart door again. The floor told a different story. Scuff marks near the seat. Someone had knelt there, not sat, and a thin line of wax still clung to the wood in a perfect curve, a seal shape. Her eyes softened with recognition. Someone had opened a letter here, in haste, in fear. She tucked the handkerchief deep into her pocket, then looked toward the church tower above the trees. The bell stood silent, heavy with unanswered prayers. She closed her notebook, whispered to herself. Someone had taken the second letter. It didn't take long. The village always needed someone to blame, and Mrs. Vale, nervous, pale, and new, was convenient. By noon, Inspector Slack had her name written bold in his notebook. Forgery, tampering, possibly theft. The words rolled out of his mouth like they'd been waiting there all morning. He arrived at the post office with 2 constables. Voices followed him in waves, half pity, half satisfaction. Poor girl. Always seemed too quiet. I said so from the start. Marple stood across the street, hands folded behind her back. She didn't move as they led Mrs. Vale out. The young woman's eyes were blank, as if emptied overnight. Her hands were still ink-stained from work. "Do you deny handling the vicar's letter?" Slack asked. She shook her head. "I delivered it, that's all." "Then why reseal it?" She hesitated. Her lips trembled. "Because it broke." Slack nodded, satisfied. "Always the simple ones who present. Meddle," he signaled to the constables. "Take her in. We'll sort the rest in Much Benham." The motorcar door closed with a metallic finality. The engine coughed. Then silence. Across the street, shutters opened one by one. Faces peeked out. Voices returned. Safe, now. Order restored. Mrs. Bantry sighed as she joined Marple. Dreadful business. But at least it's done. She looked guilty, didn't she? Marple's eyes stayed on the dust where the motorcar had been. "Appearances often do," she said softly. "Doctor," Haydock stopped beside them, wiping his glasses. "Slack thinks she stole the letter for blackmail. It fits." Marple looked up. "Does it?" He shrugged. "As much as anything does in this place." Then he left, relieved enough to forget the question. By afternoon, the village had mended itself. Teapots refilled. Voices warmed again. Even laughter returned to the post office steps. The dead were buried faster than the truth. Mrs. Bantry hosted a small gathering that evening. Cakes, sympathy, polite disapproval. The room hummed with the comfort of a solved mystery. Only Marple stayed quiet. She sat near the window, hands folded neatly in her lap. Outside, the church tower loomed above the rooftops, clock face pale in the dusk, ticking on, measured, certain. Yet in her mind, something refused to match. The timing, the letter, the tremor in Mrs. Vale's hand, the wax thread she had found on the cart floor, pieces that looked connected but weren't, pieces that refused to settle. Lady Bantry poured more tea. "Jane, you're awfully silent. Surely you think the poor girl's guilty?" Marple smiled faintly. "I think," she said, "the clock has struck too soon." Bantry blinked. "The clock?" Marple looked up at the church tower. Its hands glimmered in the fading light. The sound drifted across the rooftop, steady, sure, wrong. "But truth," she murmured, "rarely kept time." The next morning brought rain, soft, steady, and grey, the kind that made truth feel heavier. Miss Marple walked to the vicarage under her small black umbrella. The gravel crunched beneath her shoes, steady and patient. Inside, Reverend Clement waited, pale and worn from sleeplessness. The house still smelled faintly of lilies and old paper. He poured her tea without speaking. When he finally did, his voice trembled at the edges. "I keep hearing his words," he said quietly. Just before he fell, he said, "Some letters forgive, some condemn." Marple stirred her tea once. The spoon clinked, sharp and hollow. "Forgive and condemn," she repeated. "Strange things for a vicar to say," he nodded. He looked frightened, Jane. Not sick, not faint, frightened, as though something in that letter judged him. Marple set her cup down. Perhaps it did. The rain beat harder on the window. She watched the drops trail down like ink lines, each one ending. before it reached the sill. "Did he ever receive personal letters from London?" she asked. "Not that I know of," Clement said. "Though there were donations, endowments, old debts, he was strict with records. Where are those records?" "In his study, but the constable sealed it this morning." Marple smiled faintly. "Then it's fortunate I came early." She rose and crossed to the door before he could object. The study smelled of cold ash and ink. Papers were stacked neatly, untouched by the chaos outside. Her fingers traced the spines of the parish ledgers, all labelled, all dated, until the last one left open. The handwriting was careful, but the ink different. Violet, not blue, not black. Violet, her eyes narrowed. Funerary ink, old-fashioned, used only for death notices and memorial records. "Reverend," she called softly, "when did your brother begin using violet ink?" He stepped into the room, puzzled. "My brother?" "Vicar," she said. "You called him that once. My brother in the cloth." He smiled sadly. "Ah, no, he never did. Thought it sentimental." Marple pointed to the ledger. "Then someone else wrote here, someone marking a death that had not yet been spoken. The line on the page was clear, a single name, a date. Yesterday's date, the vicar's own." Reverend Clement's breath caught. "Good Lord." Marple's gaze stayed fixed on the ink, still faintly damp at the corner, as though written that very morning. The violet shade matched perfectly to the wax she had found in the post-cart. No ordinary letter, not a confession, a notice, prepared in advance. She closed the ledger slowly, her fingertips leaving no mark. "Some letters forgive," she said softly, "and some condemn." Her eyes lifted to the rain-smeared glass. The world beyond looked blurred, distant, unreal. "Death," she murmured, had written that letter. Dusk crept through street, merry-mead like spilled ink. The light thinned. Shadows softened the lines of the familiar village. Miss Marple worked at her small writing table, spectacles low, 3 sheets spread before her. Ink samples. One from the church ledger, one from the parish will, and one violet, sharp, alive, from the torn scrap found in the post-cart. She compared them the way she compared people. Quietly, patiently, waiting for one to tell the truth. The church ink was pale, almost grey, old stock, used for years. The will ink richer, but blue. The last, a deeper tone, oily under the lamplight. London-made, pricey. She knew that colour. She reached for her small notebook and flipped to an earlier page. A list of suppliers. Paper, wax, ink, stamps, every detail the postmistress had mentioned in passing. And one name stood out. Greaves and Hall. Solicitors, Much Benham. They handled most parish wills, estate disputes, and the kind of quiet matters people preferred never to name, aloud. Her needle paused in midair. A thread of thought drew itself through the clues. The violet wax, the funerary ink. The phrase, "Some letters forgive, some condemn." Someone had written a death notice before a man was dead. Someone with access to legal stationery. And someone who knew that paper could bury sin faster than soil. She rose and crossed to her cabinet, the boards creaking under her step. From the drawer she took the handkerchief that held the wax thread, set it beside the ink. Under the lamplight, the colour matched perfectly. Not lilac, not accident, deliberate. Marple smiled faintly, the sort of smile that held no pleasure, only understanding. The letter wasn't a confession at all. It was a document, a will, rewritten, delivered in secret. She remembered the solicitor's face, a flash from some old village gathering, quiet man, precise speech. Mr. Greaves, always polite, always careful with words, too careful. The vicar had known something. He'd seen the falsified line, confronted the man. And that man, fearing exposure, had sent the violet envelope to silence him, turning inheritance into instrument. Outside, the church bell chimed 7, each note dull, deliberate. Marple looked toward the sound. Even the hour seemed slower tonight, weighed down with knowing. She took up her pen, dipped it in the same ink, and wrote a single line in her tidy script. Much, Benham, Solicitors, Greaves. Violet wax, funerary ink, date falsified. Then she closed the book, folded her hands, and let out a quiet breath. Truth had a scent, tonight, ink and wax and guilt, old as sin, familiar as tea. She whispered it aloud, not for anyone, not even herself, just to seal the thought in air. Now she knew, she said softly, whose sin required sealing. The invitation went out that morning. Simple, handwritten, tea at 4. No one refused Miss Marple's tea. Even Inspector Slack accepted, though, grudgingly. Lady Bantry arrived first, hat bright, curiosity brighter. Mr. Greaves, the solicitor, came last, precise, polite, faintly uneasy. The table was set. 3 cups, 1 extra, a plate of shortbread, a pot steaming gently between them. Perfect civility, the kind that hides something sharp beneath. Slack sat stiffly, notebook in his coat. I assume, Miss Marple, this isn't just social. Oh, but it is, she said sweetly. Nothing more serious than a few thoughts on ink. Lady Bantry laughed. Ink? My dear Jane, you've gone from knitting to chemistry. Marple smiled. Not chemistry, memory. The way handwriting remembers its owner. She poured tea for each of them, careful, steady, her movements calm, predictable, measured, exactly how truth likes to begin. Mr. Greaves adjusted his cuff. Handwriting, you say? Yes. She passed him a folded sheet. The vicar's ledger. You prepared it, I believe. He glanced at it, quick, almost careless. Routine work. Probate entry. Slack leaned forward. Is it? The ink looks different. Greaves shrugged. New bottle. We change suppliers often. Marple's eyes stayed kind. But surely not violet ink for a death record still unwritten. He froze for a breath, then laughed too quickly. Old habits. We keep both kinds in the office. Lady Bantry sipped her tea. Sounds rather funereal, doesn't it? No one laughed this time. Marple set another page before him. The torn scrap from the postcard, wax residue faint along the edge. Would you say this came from your office too? Greaves didn't touch it. He looked at Slack instead. I don't see the relevance. Slack folded his arms. Maybe you should. Miss Marple found the same wax as your seal. Greaves' jaw tightened. That's absurd. Perhaps, Marple said softly. But absurdities do have a way of coming true in villages like ours. The room felt smaller. Only the clock ticked. Steam rose between the cups, clouding faces, sharpening silence. Marple leaned forward slightly. Forgive me, Mr. Greaves, but you knew Reverend Clement better than you admit, didn't you? He confronted you about the parish will. He looked at her then. A sharp look, a cornered look, and his hand, steady all afternoon, tightened on the teacup. You're mistaken. Am I? The china creaked. His fingers trembled. A drop slid down the rim and fell on the saucer. Dark, not tea. Marple saw it first. Violet. He set the cup down too quickly, but the damage was done. His thumb left a streak across the porcelain, shiny, smudged, unmistakable. His hand left a smear of violet. The silence that followed was thick, unmoving. Only the faint tick of the mantel clock dared interrupt it. Inspector Slack leaned forward. Explain yourself, Miss Marple. She didn't rush. Truth never needed speed. There were 2 letters. She began softly. One meant to forgive, the other to condemn. Slack frowned. 2? Yes, both sealed in violet wax. One was a will, the other a confession. Her eyes turned toward Mr. Greaves. You, sir, handled both. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Marple continued, voice calm, even. The vicar discovered discrepancies in the parish fund. Old donations missing. Numbers that didn't reconcile. A forgery hidden neatly within a legal document, signed, sealed, filed. Slack's pen stopped moving. Marple's gaze didn't. The vicar wrote to you, Mr. Greaves. He asked for clarification. You visited him at dusk, bringing a forged draft. You told him it was the corrected version of the parish will. In truth, you replaced the one that proved your guilt. Greaves shifted in his seat. Lady Bantry's breath caught. Even Slack stayed still. Marple lifted the torn paper from the table. The violet thread of wax I found in the dime. Postcard yours. The funerary ink yours. The envelope delivered by a frightened postmistress who never knew she carried a weapon disguised as mercy. She placed the paper down gently. The letter you sent him was not a confession. It was the final version of the will, a death notice, written in advance. Greaves tried to laugh, but his voice cracked halfway. Ridiculous. You have no proof. Marple smiled faintly. On the contrary, the proof is still on your hand. He looked down. The violet smear glistened in the lamplight. Wet, indisputable. Slack straightened. Go on. Marple folded her hands. When Reverend Clement realized the deception, he confronted you that afternoon. You argued. He threatened to expose the fraud in writing before the parish. You left. And you knew he would speak. Her tone dropped to a whisper. So you returned with a safer silence. Lady Bantry gasped. Slack's eyes widened. Poison, Marple said, simply, in his tonic. A mild compound, easily overlooked as heart failure. You gave it to him, pretending to deliver reconciliation. Then you left the envelope in his pocket, an empty shell where a man's last truth should have been. Greaves stood suddenly, chair scraping the floor. His face was ashen, voice breaking. He would have ruined me, he shouted. He wanted to make a spectacle, destroy everything I'd built. He gave me no choice. Marple didn't flinch. She looked at him the way one might look at a cracked vase, sad but unsurprised. No man ruins another, she said softly. They only finish what's already begun. Greaves sank back into his chair. The fight gone. The room heavy with the sound of breathing and defeat. Slack nodded slowly, signaling the constables waiting by the door. Marple rose, smoothing her skirt, voice calm again. There's no need to hurry, Inspector. He's already undone. She turned toward the window, where dusk pressed against the glass like smoke. Truth, she whispered, quietly, had already done it. By morning, it was finished. The village woke to rain again, soft, forgiving rain that made everything seem smaller, quieter, easier to forget. Inspector Slack arrived at the vicarage before dawn. No bluster this time, no sharp words, just a man with tired eyes and a folded list. He gathered the documents himself, the violet-stained ledger, the forged will, the tonic bottle with its faint chemical scent. He sealed them in brown paper with a kind of reverence, as though truth itself were fragile. When he looked up, Miss Marple was waiting by the window. Your case, Inspector, she said kindly. Slack nodded. For once, there was no sarcasm in his voice. Seems you had it right all along, Miss Marple. She smiled faintly. I often hope not. It would make the world a gentler place. He said nothing to that, just tipped his hat and left, his boots echoing against the wet stones. By noon, word had spread. Mr. Greaves taken into custody. Confession written, signed, trembling. Mrs. Vale released, her name cleared. The post office door creaked open as she stepped out, same grey coat, same nervous hands, but her eyes softer now. Villagers turned to watch her pass. Some nodded, some whispered. A few offered apologies, clumsy and late. She accepted each one with a quiet nod and walked home without looking back. Mrs. Bantry visited Marple that afternoon with scones and guilt. Terrible thing, Jane, she sighed. To think we all believed her guilty. I feel quite ill about it. Marple poured tea for her friend. Human nature, she said gently. We rush to accuse the frightened. They're easier to blame. Bantry looked ashamed. She'll never forgive us. She will, Marple said. People who fear punishment rarely hold grudges. They're simply relieved to be free. Outside, the rain slowed. Children's voices echoed faintly from the lane. Life, stubborn as ever, resumed its rhythm. Marple moved about the parlour quietly, gathering empty cups, folding napkins, setting the tea things in order. The kettle hummed softly, its sound warm and familiar. The little house smelled of lavender and ash, a comforting sort of melancholy. Her eyes lingered on the chair where Mr. Greaves had sat. A faint ring of violet still marked the saucer beneath it. She wiped it away carefully with her cloth. No bitterness in the motion, only understanding. Some sins, she thought, came from greed, others from fear. but most from the simple wish to be seen as good when one was not. The clock ticked on. Lady Bantry rose to leave. Marple walked her to the door. They stood for a moment watching the clouds lift, the wet rooftops shining pale in the light. "Will you rest now, Jane?" Marple smiled. "Perhaps after I wash the cups." When the door closed, the house fell into its quiet again. Marple looked at the tea tray, 4 cups. One missing. Always one missing. She sighed softly, almost fondly. She pitied the guilty, she whispered, and the fooled alike. Evening again. Rain, tapping at the window. Soft and steady. The kind that sounds like thought. Miss Marple sat by the fire, a small lamp lit beside her. The day's work done, the kettle cooling, the silence hers alone. Her knitting needles moved slowly now, not for pattern, just for rhythm, the mind's way of breathing. Each stitch recalled a moment, Mrs. Vale's trembling hands, the vicar's last words, Greaves's cracked confession, all of them woven in, loop by loop. The yarn was pale grey tonight, simple wool, but a faint violet dye had bled into the fibres left over from an old project. She noticed it only when the firelight caught it, a whisper of colour, beautiful in its way, but stubborn. She rubbed the thread between her fingers. The colour clung, wouldn't wash out, wouldn't fade. Violet, the shade of deceit, of ink, of silence. She thought about how small the beginning had been, a letter, a seal, a trembling hand, and how large the ending had grown like ivy on a wall, spreading over truth until it seemed part of it. The village had returned to peace, children back to games, tea poured without hesitation. And yet, she knew, nothing was quite the same. People forget too easily, forgive too quickly, and sometimes that was mercy. Other times, cowardice. The rain thickened. The sound filled the cottage, slow and even. She counted with it, needles tapping in time. Truth had a rhythm, too rarely loud, rarely swift. It crept, it waited, it stained. She glanced toward the small envelope resting on her desk, Greaves's written confession. Slack had left her a copy, for the records, he'd said, but she hadn't read it, not once. She didn't need to. There were things better known without words, better felt, in silence. She placed her knitting aside, folded neatly, the violet threads trailing across her lap, the colour still faint against her fingers. A reminder, some marks never fully leave. Marple looked toward the window again. The lamplight caught the raindrops as they slid down the glass, each one separate, each one leaving a trail that vanished almost at once. People were much the same, she thought. Lives crossing, touching, gone again, leaving behind faint lines that someone like her noticed when others never did. The fire dimmed, the rain softened. Her breath joined both, calm and unhurried. She whispered to herself, half in reflection, half in warning. "Violet stains," she said softly. They never spread far. Her eyes lowered to the folded wool, the faint hue still there, quiet and sure. She smiled, just a little. "Secrets," she murmured, "behave the same." Sunday morning came clear and quiet. The storm had passed. The village glistened beneath her, washed sky. Miss Marple walked to the church with the small envelope in her handbag. The violet seal had dulled overnight, the wax cracked faintly at the edge. Even guilt, she thought, faded with air. Reverend Clement met her at the door. His eyes were tired, but peace had returned to them. He took the envelope with both hands, like something sacred. "Back where it belongs," he said softly. Marple nodded. "The parish safe, I think. Let the past keep its own guard." He led her to the vestry. The small iron box sat beneath the hymn ledgers, lock, polished, and old. She placed the letter inside, slow and careful. The sound of the latch closing was faint, final. Outside, the bell began to toll, one clean note after another. Life restored, order renewed. Lady Bantry appeared by the church gate, fur collar bright against the morning sun. She waved cheerfully, then joined Marple on the path. "Well, Jane," she said, "the village can breathe again, even Mrs. Price." Ridley stopped whispering. Marple smiled. Then it truly is a miracle. They walked together toward the lane. The scent of damp earth rose from the grass. Somewhere, a child laughed loud, reckless, alive. Bantry glanced at the handbag swinging from Marple's wrist. "You kept it all night." "I did." "Why, dear? Wouldn't you rather be rid of it?" Marple looked ahead. Her tone stayed light, but her eyes thoughtful. "Some things are best carried for a little while. It helps them lose their weight." Bantry tilted her head. Still, most would have burned it. "Ah," Marple said softly. "But then we'd forget what it cost to keep secrets in ink." They stopped outside the garden gate. The roses were heavy with rain. A sparrow shook itself on the fence post, scattering droplets like small pearls. Bantry smiled faintly. "You're a strange one, Jane Marple." "Only old," she said. "And old minds collect reminders." "Reminders?" Marple met her gaze, eyes bright with quiet certainty. "Yes, they weigh less than regrets." Lady Bantry blinked, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. "Then I hope I never have too many." Marple's smile deepened, just a touch. "Everyone does, eventually. It's what makes the kettle sing." Bantry frowned. "I beg your pardon." Marple opened her gate, turning once more toward the quiet lane. "When the water's heated enough," she said softly, "it finds its voice." Lady Bantry gave up trying to follow, and laughed instead. "Come for tea tomorrow, Jane." "Always," Marple said. The gate clicked behind her. Inside, the cottage was warm again. She set the kettle on the stove, the same familiar sound rising, calm and certain. Outside, the rain began to fall once more, gentle, steady, and the kettle began to sing. Davis's voice returned, soft, calm, familiar, the kind that settles after truth has spoken. "So, could you have guessed before Miss Marple did?" A pause. Which clue betrayed Mr. Greaves, the wax, the ink, or the silence? The sound of rain lingered faintly beneath his words. A kettle hummed somewhere in the distance. The calm after the crime. He let the question hang, just long enough. "Tell us below," he continued, voice low and warm. "Which moment made you certain? The letter in her hand? The smear on the cup? Or that tremor of guilt too quiet to name?" Pages turned softly in the background, like memory itself. "Thank you for listening to tonight's mystery," he said. "If you enjoyed it, share your thoughts. Your theories, your favorite moment when truth began to stir." A gentle pause, then the familiar smile in his tone. "Tomorrow." He let the word stretch. "Another kettle will boil, and another quiet sin will whisper through Street Mary Mead." The kettle whistled once clear, steady, final, then faded into silence.